So we're gonna. Oh, one more thing. I thought it was very interesting that Roald Dahl chose to or have the narrator describe that James kind of like the centipede, because then it also brought back home how sad James's life is. Like, remember, for 3 years he's been living with two really awful, awful people, and they're terrible to him. They don't even use his name. They call him horrible, awful things. And he has no joy. He has no toys. He has no books. He has no other kids to play with. And so, what's kind of sad but kind of touching to me is that um, James is really enjoying this interaction, even if it is the centipede teasing the earthworm or whatever, and just like the other creatures watching, he's enjoying like the laughing and the joking going on because his life has been so sad. So I thought that was a really nice thing to put in there because it kind of reminded me of where James has come from and like what he's suffered already. Okay, chapter 13. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of threads at either end, so it actually looked more like a hammock than a bed. Remember, a hammock is that kind of thing that hangs between trees, and it's like a cloth thing that you can like sit in and swing in or lay back and take a nap in. So Miss Spider is using her silk to, or whatever she spins webs with, to make hammocks. Um, but it was a magnificent affair, and the stuff that it was made of shimmered like silk in the pale light. I do hope you'll find it comfortable, Miss Spider said to the old green grasshopper. I made it as soft and silky as I possibly could. I spun it with gossamer. It's a type of material. That's a much better quality thread than the one I use for my own web. Thank you so much, my dear lady, the old green grasshopper said, climbing into the hammock. Ah, this is just what I needed. Good night, everybody. Good night. Then Miss Spider spun the next hammock, and the ladybug got in. After that, she spun a long one for the centipede and an even longer one for the earthworm. And how do you like your bed? She said to James when it came to his turn. Hard or soft? I like it soft, thank you very much, James answered. So I guess Miss Spider can spin, like if someone wants it harder or firmer, like a mattress firmer, she spins more thread. But if you want it kind of like that you can sink into, she's gonna make it with like less thread, so it sort of hangs. And right there, I have enough evidence now to say Miss I would say Miss Spider is thoughtful. My evidence is that she's making beds for everyone, first of all. But then also, she takes the time to say, James, like, do you like to sleep on a harder surface or a softer surface? And that's thoughtful because she could have just spun him a hammock and been like, you get what you get. But she actually took the time to ask him. So I would say that Miss Spider is thoughtful. I like it soft, thank you very much, James answered. For goodness sake, stop staring around the room and get on with my boots, the centipede said. You and I are never going to get to sleep at this rate. And kindly line them up neatly in pairs as you take them off. Don't just throw them over your shoulder. James worked frantically on the centipede's boots. Each one had laces that had to be untied and loosened before it could be pulled off. And to make matters worse, all the laces were tied up in the most terrible, complicated knots that had to be unpicked with fingernails. It was just awful. It took about 2 hours. And by the time James had pulled off the last boot of all and lined them up in a row on the floor, 21 pairs altogether, the centipede was fast asleep. Ooh! He lined them all up, 21 pairs. Pair is a bunch of two. So 21 pairs times 2 shoes a pair is how many boots? 21 times 2? On 3. 1, 2, 3. 42. Ah! Blind earthworm is actually correct. The centipede does not have 100 feet. He has 42. Interesting. That's surprising. Wake up, centipede, whispered James, giving him a gentle dig in the stomach. It's time for bed. Thank you, my dear child, the centipede said, opening his eyes. Then he got down off the sofa and ambled across the room and crawled into his hammock. James got into his hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was compared with the hard, bare boards that his aunts had always made him sleep upon at home. Lights out, said the centipede drowsily. Nothing happened. Turn out the light, he called, raising his voice. James glanced around the room, wondering which of the others he might be talking to, but they were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring loudly through his nose. The ladybug was making whistling noises as she breathed, and the earthworm was coiled up like a spring at one end of his hammock, wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. As for Miss Spider, she had made a lovely web for herself across one corner of the room, and James could see her crouching right in the very center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. "I said, turn out the light," shouted the centipede angrily. "Are you talking to me?" James asked him. "Of course I'm not talking to you, you moron," the centipede answered. "That crazy glowworm has gone to sleep with her light on." For the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling, and there he saw a most extraordinary sight. Something that looked like a gigantic fly without wings. It was at least 3 feet long, so 1, 2, like we're talking this big. Was standing upside down upon its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and the tail end of this creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light, as bright as the brightest electric bulb, was shining out of its tail and lighting up the whole room. "Is that a glowworm?" asked James, staring at the light. "It doesn't look like any sort of worm to me." "Of course it's a glowworm," the centipede answered. "At least that's what she calls herself. Although actually, you are quite right. She isn't really a worm at all. Glowworms are never worms. They are simply lady fireflies without wings. Wake up, you lazy beast." But the glowworm didn't stir, so the centipede reached out of his hammock and picked up one of his boots from the floor. "Put out that wretched light!" he shouted, hurling the boot up at the ceiling. But the glowworm didn't stir, until finally she opened very, very slowly one eye and stared at the centipede. "There is no need to be rude," she said coldly. "All in good time." "Come on, come on, come on," shouted the centipede, "or I'll put it out for you." "Oh, hello, James," the glowworm said, looking down and giving James a little wave and a smile. "I didn't see you come in. Welcome, my dear boy. Welcome and good night." Then, click, out went the light. James Henry Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleeping noises that the creatures were making all around him, and wondering what on earth was going to happen to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not nearly as terrible as they looked. In fact, they weren't really terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful, in spite of all the shouting and arguing that went on between them. "Good night, old green grasshopper," he whispered. "Good night, ladybug. Good night, Miss Spider." But before he could go through them all, he had fallen fast asleep. And that's the end of chapter 13. And this is a really long read aloud video, so I am stopping here. Today, I do want you to think of a response. Now, you're not going to have to write it. What I want you to do is open up the doc that I sent you a few days ago, the Reading is Thinking doc, and I want you to use one of the sentence starters or the sentence stems, and I want you to think about a thought you have about the book so far. And what I'd like you to do is write it in the comments below so underneath this read aloud assignment, write a comment about the book so far. It could be something you've noticed, something you're wondering. So I'm just curious your thoughts on the book. Now today, because you're just commenting, it's okay if you don't back it up with text evidence as your proof. Okay, so I want to make this clear. I want you to go about as if you were going to write a response. So pick a thinking stem, or if you already have one in your head, great. I want you to think out your thought completely. And I also want you to think about, if you were writing a response, what would be your proof that you'd back it up with? So I'd want you to think about the proof, but you don't need to include it in your comment. So you're going to comment in the comment section below this read aloud, whatever your thought is. Now, even if I don't want you to necessarily write down the evidence, I want you to be thinking about it, because you should be thinking about it. So for example, it wouldn't make sense if I put in there, I'm wondering if the centipede is going to go get a new set of shoes. Like, that's not really on topic, and it's not really, I would have no evidence to back that up. So that would not be a good comment. That's not one I would be like, good job. However, now don't use this one, obviously. If you did one like, I noticed that the centipede is really nudgy and he's trying to get a rise out of a lot of people, that would be an okay comment as long as in your head you were thinking, here's my evidence. He was teasing the earthworm and trying to get him upset. And then when the light wasn't going out, he took a boot and hurled it at the glowworm. Ugh. Now, so you don't have to put that proof. If you want to, can you put the proof? Sure. But for today, to be clear, you're just writing a thought about anything we've read so far. So from chapters 1 to, we just finished chapter 13. Okay? What I'm going to include also attached to this is a doc that has the character names and their spellings. So I'm looking at the spellings. And also, guess what? Names start with what? Take a wild guess. A capital letter. So this is like a really long read aloud. I hope you enjoyed it. I will speak with you soon. Mwah. Mrs. Witchman, signing out.